Hello, welcome to episode 3333 of Two Yogis, One Cave. Sorry, I'm in a goofy mood right now. It looks like Bryn is too. It's going to be a fun one. And today we're talking about the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. And if I just said a bunch of mumbo jumbo and you've never heard that word before, it's because the Bhagavad Gita is in Sanskrit. And it literally means Song of the Lord. So what am I even talking about when I say the Bhagavad Gita? And this is what I'm talking about. It is a holy text from India, from the Hindu tradition, and also gets talked a lot about in the yogic tradition.
So we like to use the Bhagavad Gita as well as the Yoga Sutras as our two primary texts in the yoga teacher training. The Yoga Sutras is very literal, and it's also very abbreviated. So it only has 200 verses in the entire text that's describing the basically the scientific method of yoga. The Bhagavad Gita is different from the Yoga Sutras in that it's a story. And within this story is hidden, many people say all of the teachings of yoga, all of the different types of yoga are described within the Bhagavad Gita through this narrative and through the main character, Arjuna, who's representative of us, the spiritual seeker on the journey, facing temptation and overcoming it. So that's what we want to dive into today.
Yeah, just to talk about that a little bit too, it's important in yoga that we interpret these things symbolically, that it's not necessarily some sort of religious dogma that we're trying to get past. Because when we interpret things symbolically, then we can include everything. We don't have to limit just to the Bible or just to the Bhagavad Gita or just to the Quran. We can start to interpret holy texts symbolically. And when we do that, we figure out that they're universal, that the meaning applies to all of us. It doesn't just apply to a certain amount of people that believe in a certain faith. It actually applies to everybody. And that's the neat thing, to see the connections between these books and also to see the differences based on cultural times and what was happening in those areas.
And you and I actually did a class together a couple of years ago where we were comparing the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible with each other. That was a fun course.
It was really fun. I feel like we had really good response from that too.
Yeah, so maybe we should do it again.
Maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we'll do it on here. Who knows?
Yeah. I would say not today because I'm not prepared for that. But
no.
I am prepared to talk about this text, which I have enjoyed studying off and on for like 5 or 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. So here's a little bit about the background, and I feel like we should dim the lights a little bit for dramatic effect. Yeah, because you're about to hear a little bit about a Romeo and Juliet or Hatfield and McCoy type of story, a battle of two families that goes awry. I guess a battle would go awry. So a story of two families that goes awry. The Bhagavad Gita is part of a bigger world, a huge text called the Mahabharata, which Bryn likes to correct me and say, it's the Mahabharata. So I may say...
I don't know if I say it like that.
Okay, somebody corrected me. I think you corrected me. But
well, it's just, you just have to say the BH with some emphasis, with some oomph.
Mahabharata.
Mahabharata. Although I actually am embarrassed because I'm sure anybody with real Sanskrit knowledge is listening to us and being like, oh, you're still butchering it. So I apologize.
Yeah. So with that all said, let's get into more of the introduction of it. So again, we talked that there were two families here, and these two families are actually families. They're two brothers from the outset that...
they're one family.
One family, two brothers from the outset that are really on a collision course with destiny. And the reason is because there's this brother. His name is Dhritarashtra, and he is born blind. In Hindu culture at that time, and he's royalty as well. So in Hindu culture at that time, a blind man could not be a king. It was seen as a bad omen. So rather than having the firstborn be the one who's going to inherit the throne, it's actually the secondborn, a man named Pandu, who is going to inherit the throne. You have anything to say about that?
No.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, I want you to keep going.
Perfect. Okay. So Dhritarashtra and Pandu are born. They are given all the luxuries that a potential king could want. And eventually their father dies. Dhritarashtra is passed on the crown, as was said before, to Pandu. Now, there's a big problem with Pandu. And the big problem with Pandu is that he can't have kids. What's the name for that again? Incontinent.
Yes, but it's because
right?
he's been cursed by a sage that was disguised as a deer, who he killed the deer while he was making love to his wife, and the deer in his dying moment cursed him that if he was to ever touch his wives, he would immediately die.
Yes, so that's the reason why he's incontinent. I forgot about that.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so.
Yes. Pandu has 2 wives,
Mm-hmm.
and Dhritarashtra has 1.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. And Dhritarashtra is very continent, I guess you could say. He's very productive because he ends up having 101 kids. Where Pandu ends up marrying a woman who, it's a whole other story, but she actually gains 3 boons from a sage. Which boons are meant to be, like she can call upon the gods basically for whatever she wants, and she's granted it.
Or was it 5 boons, and she had to test out one of them? She tests out one of them to see if it works, and it does work, and that's where she has the bastard son that she abandons, Karna, who ends up being on the opposite side. Then
Yes.
she has 3 boons for herself, for the 3 elder sons, and then she has 1 boon left over for the younger wife, because Pandu has 2 wives, and the last boon goes to the younger wife, and she actually gets 2 kids out of that boon because she invokes help from the twin gods. So 1
That's
boon
right.
renders 2 kids, and the older wife's 3 boons renders 3 children.
You're so right.
Yes.
Thank you for that correction. I
And-
apologize for that. And people who know the Bhagavad Gita who are listening were probably like, wait. 3 boons? Are you kidding me? Like, have you read the story before?
But it's like, even while we talk about it, what does that even mean, a boon? It just means that I think this older wife of Pandu's, when she's young, because she does something nice for a sage.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sage basically says, this is how I'm going to bless you. You get 5 boons. And once Pandu comes home from, that's many years ago, and then many years later, Pandu comes home and he's devastated because he's like, I can never touch my wives again. So what am I going to do? And then a first wife comes in and says, oh, well, I actually have these 5 boons. We can invoke the gods, which then means that their 5 children are actually children of 4 different gods.
Yeah. How cool to be a child of a god.
And also, I just want to say, so Pandu has 5, and then Dhritarashtra has 100. Although one thing that I remember in one of the tales, I'll say about the Mahabharata, that there's different tales in different regions, so we listen to some of the different stories about it. But in one of the tales, Dhritarashtra's wife, she actually gets pregnant and is pregnant for 2 years. It's like the baby won't come out. And I think she gets her maidservant to even like try to beat the baby out of her. So like she's literally getting beaten on the abdomen. And I think when the babies finally do come out, they actually come out as these like unformed lumps of clay.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow they all do form into like little human beings, but I forget what it is, if it's like invoking help from another deity again that makes them into a formed lump. But what was the name of their oldest kid? Duryodhana.
Yeah, Duryodhana.
That's the most important character on Dhritarashtra's side, is his eldest son Duryodhana. And then there's the 5 brothers on Pandu's side, and the eldest is Yudhisthira.
And he's the god.
And his dad is Yama.
Right,
God
which
of
is,
death.
yeah. And Dharma, the god of Dharma, too.
Okay, and then the next one is the
Bhima.
And his dad was it Hanuman?
No.
Oh,
His
Hanuman
brothers.
Hanuman is his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Who's his dad?
Vayu, the wind
God of air.
Wind god, yeah.
Okay. And then Arjuna's dad is
Indra, the king of the gods.
Yes.
Yeah, which makes sense that he becomes the main character, really, in the Bhagavad Gita. And we'll get to why he becomes the main character.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go
And then the two younger brothers are Nakula and Sahadeva, and their parents are some twin deities that we don't remember.
Yeah.
Although Michael was saying that like the Dhritarashtra's and his wife are super pregnant.
Yeah,
you said continent. I don't know why we can't think of the word
I know.
where you have tons of babies. The thing is that okay, once you remember the word, you can tell me. But like what that represents symbolically is actually like the lack of focus within the mind, the lack of narrowing one's desires and purpose into like a type of single-pointed focus. Whereas the five brothers on the Pandu side, they actually represent the first 5 chakras within the body. And so each of them has a very purposeful intent to serve in their lifetime.
Fertile. The word is fertile.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And isn't that symbolic also that Dhritarashtra has these kids, and again, he's already got the symbolism that he can't see, so he can't perceive things. Again, not to interpret that literally, like, oh, he's a bad person, he can't perceive because he's blind. No, not at all. This is a symbolic text. So he cannot perceive, and he has these kids with his wife, who also actually took a blindfold. Since her husband couldn't see, she decided to take a blindfold so that she could share in his suffering. So she can't perceive either. And they've got this huge blob that comes out, which, if we look at Duryodhana, he's like King Ego. He represents, the egoic mind, the egoic self. And all of those other brothers that are with him are parts of that ego. Things like desire, attachment, judgment in not so great of a way.
Greedy, hoardiness, lust,
all those things.
Any type of it's the senses. Like they represent the senses without any type of boundary or direction.
Yeah, and they're all clumped together. It's like, it's symbolically, it's saying it's all the same thing. That it doesn't need to be separated. And even in the Bhagavad Gita, Yogananda actually tries to translate all of those brothers, but their names are rarely given in the Mahabharata translation. They don't go through each brother. And again, I think that's because it's as if it's all clumped together. They may go through about 10 or 11 brothers that are significant throughout the whole Mahabharata. And
I do want to, just as we're talking about this, like give credit where credit's due. We got a lot of this deeper interpretation from Yogananda's interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. Mm-hmm. And I think it's called God Talks with Arjuna.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's actually like 1,000-page translation on the Bhagavad Gita. That is really great for someone to study who's going deeper into it. Not so great in a teacher training program when they've got lots and lots of things to study.
Yeah.
But we went and studied it and then get to break it down here.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the ways that these two brothers, the Pandus and the Kurus, or Pandava and Dhritarashtra, they're all part of the initial Kuru clan, but the Pandava's kids become the Pandus because in a way they break off. So these 100 children of Dhritarashtra and the 5 children of Pandu are actually raised together. They have the same teachers teaching them archery and fighting and school and things all like that. Mm-hmm. So they have camaraderie, but at the same time, even more than that, they really have competition. And it becomes like increasingly clear as the boys start to get older that the two sets of brothers and who are cousins to each other, like continue to play tricks on each other. And it actually happens multiple times that Dhritarashtra's children, Duryodhana especially, is actually like conspires to take the lives of Pandu and his wife and their children. And so it becomes increasingly clear throughout the Mahabharata that one side is coming to represent evil because they're willing to go to such an extent to take the crown. And so it happens that on one of the initial points where they try to take the lives of the 5 Pandus, and the way that they do it is that Dhritarashtra actually builds a castle for Pandu and his children, or actually Pandu passes away.
Say, yeah.
Pandu's dead at this point.
Pandu dies shortly after the whole birth happens because he becomes lusty for his wives because he wants to celebrate the birth of his children that he thought he couldn't have, and he has sex with them, and therefore he dies like right away.
Oh, so that's another thing. So Pandu is king, and it's like as long as he had been alive and like alive to see the kingship passed on to his eldest son Yudhisthira, it seems like everything would have gone fine. But Pandu and his wives get the boons. They have the kids, but not through Pandu having sex with his wives. But then, like Michael said, Pandu gets lustful, and then he dies. So now it's just the wife and the 5 kids left to fend for themselves. So in a way, they've become powerless. And when Pandu dies, then Dhritarashtra does take the throne.
Yeah.
He becomes king.
Yes.
So then, like, he steps in as king. And there really is, like, in the story, this sort of moral weighing out who should be the heir to Dhritarashtra. Or it's not even necessarily the heir, because Dhritarashtra is just holding the throne until one of the sons comes of age. So Dhritarashtra really wants his eldest son Duryodhana to take the throne, whereas Yudhisthira should maybe be the one taking the throne because he's the son of Pandu. But ethically speaking, there is a legitimate case for both Duryodhana and Yudhisthira to take the throne because they're both son of kings. Even though Dhritarashtra was blind, he's the elder brother, and Pandava's dead. So it seems like if we were just looking at it objectively, maybe Duryodhana should be king. However, they make it very clearly like set against themselves when they continually attempt to take the lives of the Pandavas. Then it becomes, then Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra are not righteous kings. Like we need a righteous king to be in charge. And so I was saying that Pandu's dead. Dhritarashtra builds a flammable castle for Pandava's wife and their children. And the wife actually has an architect go and inspect the castle, and he says, this castle is like gonna go up in flames if you go in it. And so what they do is they actually fake their own deaths because Dhritarashtra does indeed set the castle on fire like the first night that they go inside of it. And then they fake their own deaths. They put in like makeshift bodies so that they do find like 6 dead bodies for the brothers and the mother. And then they end up escaping through the woods, and they're gone for I think maybe 12 years the first time. And what actually brings them back to say, hey, we're alive, is the fact that the brothers end up marrying one woman. Do you remember the
Draupadi?
Draupadi. So the brothers end up marrying the princess of another powerful kingdom. And once they've married the princess of a powerful kingdom, then it's like they have allies on their side. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana can't necessarily like so easily make an attempt on their life. So they do come back many years later and begin to reintegrate themselves, and you can pick it up.
Yeah, so as they're growing up, as these brothers are growing up together, so you've got the 5 brothers and you got the 101 brothers, and as they're growing up together, they're cousins and everything too, they're training, and there's always competitiveness, and it comes out that the 5 Pandava brothers are the 5 best at certain things, and these certain things are Yudhisthira is the best charioteer. Bhima is the best, he's the strongest, and so he's got the best mace. abilities. Arjuna is good at everything, all weapons, but his weapon of choice is the bow. And his teacher, who is this? Drona. His teacher, Drona.
Bhishma and Drona.
It's both Bhishma and Drona.
They're both teachers.
Both teachers.
And elders.
I want to say it's Drona that decides that only Arjuna and Drona's son are allowed to have immortal weapons, or like these divine weapons, meaning that they also carry with them elements. So like a flaming bow or a flaming arrow is one of those. So anyways, that's a little besides the point. But Nakula and Sahadev are really good with swords. And so this is good to know too, because on the training grounds, they're warrior class. I mean, they're Kshatriyas, which means that they're warrior class in
that's their caste
in Hindu tradition. So they're constantly warring against each other and constantly coming up short as far as the Kurus are coming up short, the 101 brothers against the 5 brothers in all of these areas. So that builds even more of the frustration.
Jealousy and resentment.
Right. And when their house burns, or their castle burns, and they decide to go into hiding, they hear about this tournament, and the prize for this tournament is this woman, Draupadi. And she's beautiful, and again, she's
powerful.
She's super powerful, has a very powerful father and very powerful family. So they decide to go to this tournament, and Arjuna ends up winning the archery contest. There's a little other thing that happens with another one of their brothers, actually, named Karna, who is son of the sun god, who will come later when we talk about the Bhagavad Gita.
He's super talented too, but he doesn't get to even compete because nobody knows who he really is. He doesn't even know who he really is because he was abandoned by his mother, who is also the mother of the 5 Pandavas, or the three right. Elder Pandavas.
And he is in the merchant class too.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons why. It's because his caste system isn't high enough to compete for this woman. So Arjuna wins, and the 5 brothers take home Draupadi. And by the way, at this tournament is kind of their coming out party again. They realize that they're dressing up as Brahmins, which is a priest class, but Arjuna can't help himself. He's like, I can win this tournament. So he wins it. And now everybody knows that Arjuna and his 4 brothers are alive. So they come home with Draupadi. And as they're coming home, the mom is doing something. I don't know if it's like washing dishes or whatever. She's cooking, doing something like that. And the brothers go inside and they say, Mom, you're never going to guess what we won. And before turning, she says, whatever it is that you won, all 5 of you must share it. And so they go, okay. And so now all 5 brothers have to share Draupadi as the one wife. Mm-hmm. So go women.
So then we should talk a little bit, we can talk a little bit about the practicalities of what that looked like with all 5 of them having the same wife. She is the prize wife of all of them, although I believe that all of them also take on second wives, although she besides their mother, becomes pretty much the matriarch of the household, and she gets to decide how the other wives can even be in the castle. So I believe what they do is that they each take 1 year to be with her. So one of them has her for a year, and then the next one has her for a year, and then the next one has her for a year. So that's how she cycles through being married to them.
And she loves this. It's not like a burden for her. She loves different aspects about each one of them. Her representation is Kundalini energy.
Yes.
Coming from the base of the spine.
I guess I just want to say, in a previous life, Draupadi, I think, had been so lustful and she had also wanted to have the perfect husband, so that when she died, her husband cursed her to say that, okay, you'll have the perfect husband, but it's going to come in the form of 5 different men.
Yeah.
Because, if you think that one man can fulfill all of these things, you're wrong. So it's she has the blessing and the curse of having this 5 different qualities embodied in these 5 different men.
Yeah.
But so Michael is saying it's like, now we're talking about like all the details of the story, but what does it all mean? And so it is really important to step away from, okay, these are the details of this story. What's the hidden message inside? Well, I mentioned earlier that each of the brothers represents like something very purposeful, something, a unique intention that they have to fulfill. And they're each representing different chakras within the body. And Draupadi is representing the Kundalini energy that awakens them. So that's why it's one force. Kundalini is that one all-powerful force that's residing at the base of the spine, and then as it starts to move up the spine, it stimulates and awakens each of them into their life purpose.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I don't think we defined which brother is which chakra, and maybe we should go to where they're about to all come to a war, and then maybe go back to this. So let's do that. So Draupadi becomes the 5 brothers' wives, and the 5 brothers eventually go through different quests on their own and different quests together, and eventually they come back to their cousins and their uncle. And they say, listen, like, we get it. You want to rule, right? Totally understand. Just give us 5 different
Oh, you're skipping a part.
What am I skipping?
Oh, so what we're skipping is that they fake their death. They leave. They're exiled for a while. They go to the tournament. They win Draupadi, and they come back, and they reintegrate themselves with the Kurus for a period of time.
Okay.
I don't remember what the period of time is. However, now that they're reintegrated with the Kurus, there's still like this looming question of who's going to become the king. And Duryodhana is extremely jealous, and so he schemes to get them kicked out of the kingdom. So that the way that they get kicked out of the kingdom is that he lures the eldest brother Yudhisthira into a game of dice. And with that game of dice, the game is already rigged before it ever begins. And so like Yudhisthira and Duryodhana are rolling with each other. And every time Duryodhana wins, and Yudhisthira, and every time he wins, they're betting something that they own. So like first Yudhisthira bets like land, and then he bets more land, and then he bets like clothing, and he bets everything that he owns, and then he even starts like he bets his servants, and then he starts betting his brothers, and he even bets his wife until he's lost absolutely everything. So after 17 rolls of the dice, he's lost everything, and the 5 brothers are totally put to shame. And this is like Duryodhana's moment of like shaming them, and also Draupadi's also always is sneered at the Kurus, and Karna, who's also in the picture at this point as a servant to Duryodhana. So they actually bring Draupadi into the great hall and Duryodhana says like, we own you, and they start ripping off of all of her clothes. And at that point, Draupadi prays to the goddess to save her, and so there's
Krishna. She prays to Krishna because Krishna's somehow related to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she prays to Krishna to save her, and at that point, they start unraveling her sari, but it's like an unending sari. So the material never ends, and so they can't actually humiliate her by making her naked. But she does appeal to King Dhritarashtra, who still has some dignity, and it's like, I know that Yudhisthira like bet myself and bet my brothers, but like he didn't have a right to do that. So they basically say, okay, like you can take yourself and you can take your brothers, but you have to leave the kingdom for 12 years, and then you have to spend your 13th year in hiding. Like you can return to the kingdom, but you can't show your face. And then after 13 years, like you can come once again and reintegrate yourself back into society. And so that's what happens, is that they leave again. They're in exile for like another 13 years. And I guess we could talk a little bit about the symbolism of that. But after that 13 years of exile is what Michael is about to start to bring up, which is that they come back and they say, okay, we've been gone for 13 years. You've been ruling the kingdom. we don't want to ask for a lot. We just want 5 villages where we can rule inside those villages. And then you can go ahead and pick it up from there.
Okay. And Duryodhana says, no, you guys can't have that. So there's this argument back and forth between what they can and can't have. And finally, Duryodhana says, you cannot have one hair length strand of land. Basically saying nothing. You can have nothing. And so the Pandus, again, leave, and they get ready for war. They decide that rather than allowing themselves to be shamed, rather than allowing themselves to kind of to go out and do nothing and to get out of their land, that they want to go to war. Now, this is also the time in which they start to get counsel from Krishna, which symbolically represents the higher self. And Krishna, I think, is known to a lot of people as a deity in the Hindu religion. This is part of his story as well. The Mahabharata is definitely part of his larger story and explains a lot about what he did as a teenager till old age, till really his death. Mm-hmm. So Krishna says the whole time, throughout the whole Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, he's basically telling them until they win the war, which they do, spoiler alert, until they win the war, that they need to war on the Kurus, that they need to war on their cousins. And so the Pandus are hesitant about this for a while because it's their family, it's their friends, it's their cousins, it's the people that they've known throughout their whole life. So they decide, okay, we're going to war. And once they decide we're going to war, they elect Arjuna to go and meet with Krishna and basically ask whose side he's going to be on. And Duryodhana knows of Krishna's powers. He knows that he's something beyond a physical human being, as well as Arjuna, too. And they both go to where he's living at the time. And when they go to where he's living, Duryodhana arrives and Krishna is laying on a bed and he's sleeping. And Duryodhana arrives and he goes straight to where Krishna is sleeping at his head. So he sits by his head. And Krishna goes and sits by his feet. Arjuna goes and sits by Krishna's feet.
So act of being humble and obedient, a servant.
Right, that he's in service. And so when Krishna wakes up, Krishna basically gives them 2 options. He says, yes, I'll participate in this war, and this is how I'm going to participate in this war. Either you can have me as your counsel, I won't fight, but you can have me as your counsel, me, or you can have my armies, which was something like 100,000. It was a ton of people. And Duryodhana kind of sniggers and says, oh, I'll take your army. I'll take all your armies. Great. And Arjuna says, I'll take you. So the 2 cousins are in agreement there, at least, as far as the one taking one and the one taking the other. But Arjuna knows there's something special about Krishna, and he knows it's beyond the physical. He knows that it's not a numbers game that's going to win this war, that it's actually the counsel of Krishna that's going to win it. Where Duryodhana, being the ego, all he sees are the physical aspects, right? He just sees these tons of numbers like, oh, we'll just overwhelm our cousins, the Pandus.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to think where we should go from there.
Okay, I can go.
Yes.
So now we've come to the war. Now everybody gets together. Now the Kurus get together, and they are said to have 17. I wish I knew the military term for this, but it's like 17 battalions. And the Pandavas, or the Pandus, have 5 battalions. So the Pandus are way, way, way overmatched in terms of the amount of people.
I know that tons of people come to both of their sides, though.
Yes, but the Pandus have way less. Yeah,
okay.
Way, way less. And so we come to really the start of the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord, which is transmitted to Dhritarashtra, actually.
Sanjaya.
Sanjaya transmits it to Dhritarashtra.
Yes, so we start with seeing it through the eyes of Sanjaya. So Sanjaya has been given like special omniscient eyes to be able to see the entire battle. And again, Dhritarashtra is the king father. So he's the blind king, so he's being given sight through Sanjaya and Sanjaya is describing live what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so in like right at the beginning of the battle, there's these big bellowing conch shells that are blown, right? And the Kurus blow theirs, and it's kind of a disharmonious thing, right? There's a lot of it, but it's a disharmonious thing. But then the Pandus blow theirs, the brothers start to blow theirs, as well as Krishna, and it sends fright into all the enemies.
And then that's representing these sounds like harmonizing with each other is representing each of the chakra systems and the body-mind system itself like coming into harmony with itself. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good just to mention even the battlefield itself. It's called the Battle of Kurukshetra. It's the battle for our own body-mind complex. That's what symbolically they're fighting for. And the way that Yogananda terms it is that Duryodhana and all of his men represent rebel king ego, who's really trying to sabotage the vision of the soul. And the Pandavas, led by the five brothers, Yudhisthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, are representing King's soul. They're representing the awakening of Kundalini, moving up the spine and harmonizing in the chakra centers. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we should talk about, like you mentioned earlier, what each of the brothers is representing.
Yes.
Okay. So we could start with the eldest brother, Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira represents a type of wisdom. His father is Yama, the god of death. And we mentioned just a moment ago that like they get into all of this trouble because Yudhisthira agrees to play the game of dice. Mm-hmm. And that's symbolically looking at like even us as a soul incarnating into a human body. It's like we're taking a gamble to come down into painful experiences. It's like it's just gambling on the game of life in general. And it's also representing like this adolescent attitude that we all have to mature from. And Yudhisthira goes through a lot of maturation in that 13 years that they're gone. There's a moment when they're like, I think all four brothers have died in the water. Like something happens where like they all get caught and Yudhisthira gets approached by the god of death and he has to answer every question correctly, and he does. And the god of death just goes through like this whole like stream of consciousness type of thing, and Yudhisthira has finally gained wisdom, and so he's representing like that maturation from childhood into like living embodied wisdom, and he does become the ruler after the five brothers go on to win. And I'll let you explain Bhima or add whatever you want to.
Yeah, I was just going to add with Yudhisthira that after he makes those dumb gambling decisions, he starts to live with and learn from Brahmins. So he is one that wants to seek out saintly people, seek out rishis to learn from. And so for 12 years, that's who he's learning from. So as you said, like the maturation from experience into wisdom, I think that's the real bridge right there. With Yudhisthira too, I believe, if I'm correct, that Yogananda gives the symbolic meaning of him as divine calm. Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, like divine calm, which is representative of stillness and all of that, that's really the component necessary to get from the throat chakra into the 6th chakra and the 7th chakra. If we can't sit still, our concentration is off. Good luck meditating. Good luck going into anything beyond concentration. So yeah, so that's just what I wanted to add. So with Bhima is
life force energy.
Life force energy, yes. And he's the son of the god of the wind, so that makes total sense, right? That the wind is one of the strongest things on this entire earth, maybe even the strongest, potentially. And he's the heart center, so he's the heart chakra. Bhima goes through a lot of maturation too. He even meets his half-brother Hanuman on the road, which Hanuman will know from the Ramayana, which is another cool story. And we'll go through it another time. But it's the monkey god. And Hanuman has lived for a long time once Bhima meets him. And Bhima actually steps on his tail, like calls him an old monkey and all of this stuff. And Hanuman just beats the crap out of him. Just throws him down and is like, basically like, don't judge a book by its cover. I'm your half-brother. He knows this the whole time. He's messing with him. And Hanuman's this funny, wise monkey who's extremely strong too. And Bhima hasn't met anybody yet that's really stronger than him. So he gets a nice piece of humble pie, as they say, from Hanuman.
Yeah, I actually feel like his connection to Hanuman is really significant for the heart center, because in the Ramayana, Hanuman is just so completely devoted to Ram and Sita, who are these characters that are representing also having this similar journey of like this evolutionary awakening and the soul and the ego and all of that. One interesting thing, which I am curious about your thoughts on, is that Bhima does represent life force energy. This makes sense to me. I want to make more of a connection to the heart center. Well, I guess the life force is like the breath and all of that, and the breath is surrounding the heart. But also just Bhima he is massive. He's and like so also his vice is that like he can eat for days. Like he'll just like I think even when they're traveling in the woods, the family, it's like when they come upon food, it's like they'll take just a little bit for themselves, the brothers, and then they give like the rest of it to Bhima because he's just so massive. But I'm just wondering, like, what does that massiveness and that strength have to do with the heart chakra?
Okay, so in my opinion, whenever I think of that, your question, I think of the kind of old adage, you can have whatever your heart's desire is, like your heart's desire type of deal. So meaning that our heart can lead us in different places to all sorts of nonsense, really. And again, not our true center, our true heart, but kind of that underbelly of the heart center of being desire prone.
So Bhima is very desire prone, and sometimes it can lead him in the wrong direction, and then other times he can use that to be a very great service to the world.
Even after the war, he's still like just goading Dhritarashtra by saying like, I killed all of your sons. What do you should be ashamed.
Right.
The whole time.
Right. So which is to say that like these 5 brothers are not perfect by any means. Yudhisthira does actually become like the most mature and wise out of all of them, yet he is the one that like got them in this mess in the first place. So I mean, I guess that's just to say that they're not perfect. They are symbolically representing the awakening of the Kundalini energy, but even that is to say like that's a temporary thing. It's not like, once it happens, once it's awakened, like they're always connected with their life purpose.
Right. These
characters have to keep making the decision on a daily basis to be doing what's right for them.
And that's so important in life too, in my opinion. I think it's symbolic of somebody reaching a peak, a high state, right? And we're like, man, that person's amazing. Like, look at all the things they've done. And then all the time this happens where there's some sort of fall from grace. Because the person has either isolated themselves in some way and like they're on this mountaintop and everybody's praising them and they forgot where they've come from. They stopped learning things. They just kind of rested on their laurels. As you can see, my judgmental side is coming out.
No, it's okay.
But I think it's important to know that. And I love these teachings because it's all about that.
You can never rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
I guess, we've seen that up close too many times.
Way too many times.
Somebody accomplishes something, starts resting on their laurels. Oh my God, like life goes poorly.
Yeah, and we all do that. I mean, there's all many things. We're talking about extreme examples, but there's all the time, every day, there's many examples of this. Of maybe it's not the time to rest right now and kind of slack off or whatever, but we choose to do that instead of the 20 minutes of meditation or reading or something like that. I I constantly do that, and it's something that I need to be more mindful of. So I really think that's what's trying to be symbolized, and expressed, is the heart's desire, like the life force.
The power of the life force goes, whether it can go towards good or bad, and it happens every single day.
Totally, and it depends on where our attention is.
So let's go to Arjuna.
Let's do it before this podcast becomes 4.5 hours.
I know. I'm wondering how long it is already.
Okay.
I'll say a little bit about Arjuna.
Yeah, you say something about Arjuna.
Okay, and then you'll say some more. So he's an archer, and so that archery is representing concentration. And one of the things that's most significant about this, like him amidst the other brothers, is that when we look at the 8 limbs of yoga, concentration is the 6th limb. So concentration, meditation, and samadhi or super consciousness, these are the higher limbs. But concentration is that absolute essential ingredient for us to really penetrate beyond ignorance. Mm-hmm. So, and the story of the Bhagavad Gita is his dialogue with Krishna. So we have the seeker using the elements of concentration, and that's not the only thing that he represents, and also willfulness and action, because those are elements of the 3rd chakra, to be able to seek the high self. That like he's developed these qualities within himself in order to have a conversation with the high self. And also just to say that there are many ways in which Arjuna is very conceited.
Totally.
And I mean, there's stories that we can tell. I just tell a very quick story that when he's young, he discovers an archer that's better than him, and he's so jealous that like he gets his teacher to tell this archer that's better than him to chop off his 2 fingers. Yeah. So that he can't be as good of an archer as Arjuna. So Arjuna actually has lots of insecurities. Mm-hmm. And one more thing is that that's a hopeful thing for us, that these 5 brothers that are actually representing like the awakened potential of Kundalini moving up and awakening in the body are very imperfect too.
And for his 12 years, it's important to realize that he developed the closest relationship with Krishna, that the two for a while were kind of inseparable. They saw themselves and they realized that they also had a past lifetime together too. So Krishna really saw him as a brotherly type of figure, mm-hmm. but also realized that, Krishna in this text is God incarnate. So it's his play. He realized that he's also playing this thing, that he can't really show his true self to Arjuna until he comes to more wisdom, until he comes to more of a realized state, which he does in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's pretty early in the Bhagavad Gita when he does.
It's like chapter 11 out of 18.
Yeah. Well, so I guess it's at the middle.
Yeah.
That's a short book. Thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's important to realize too. So to me, like with that said, it makes sense that Arjuna is one point of concentration, because if one point of concentration is the 6th limb, and the 8th limb is samadhi, and the 7th limb is meditation, he's the only brother that's representative of a limb there.
A higher limb.
A higher limb, yeah. Well, even...
Bhima is like life force energy, which might represent the 3rd.
Yeah, I guess kind of. You're right. But yeah, he's representative of a higher limb, which the way to develop a relationship with God or the higher self or whatever you believe in is through concentration, is through sitting down to meditate, is through sitting down to pray. So no wonder those two are linked in the story, representing like the link between concentration and the higher self.
So I'm feeling like we should wrap up this podcast, because it seems like it's been a while. But I know let's
get the last 2, and then we're done.
Nakula and Sahadeva, which is like the 2 of them like always just go together. So I can't even remember which one is which. But one of them represents beauty, and the other one represents wisdom. One of them is like the most beautiful person, the most beautiful man, and that's like his thing. And then the other one. Something occurs during those 12 years where he has the ability to see the future. Yeah. And so that's like the divine wisdom that that's being represented. So he knows everything that's going to happen, but he can't tell anybody.
Right. Wild. What a secret to have to keep.
Yeah. He knows everyone that's going to die. He knows who's going to win the war. He knows all of that. So, yeah.
Man.
Yeah, so that's the setup. And as we mentioned, like that, this is kind of everything preceding chapter 1. And in chapter 1, we just have like the existential angst of Arjuna, because he's like, I don't want to fight. Like, I don't want to fight against my family. I'd rather just go be a monk in a cave. And I think we're going to have to get into this more in a later podcast.
For sure.
But just to say a little bit, when again, this has to be interpreted symbolically, because Krishna tells him to fight, and he's not telling him to literally go kill people, but he is telling him you do have to face those bad habits inside of yourself. You can't let those rule, because if you let them rule, then like that's what's going to rule your entire body-mind complex, and everything's going to go awry. You have to overcome them. You have to put yourself in power with the awakened Kundalini energy.
Right. That's a really important point, that like that whole boom of the conscious, right? That represents the alignment of the chakras. So Krishna's saying the time is right now. If you choose not to fight, who knows when this time's going to come again.
The time is now.
The time is now to end 2 Yogis, 1 Cave. Episode 33333.
Thanks, y'all. See you later.